The twilight, a smear of bruised purples and blood oranges, bled across the endless prairie. It was the hour of ghosts and regrets, when the sun dipped below the rim of the world, taking with it the harsh glare of the day, but leaving behind a deepening chill and long skeletal shadows. Under the ancient, gnarled cottonwood, Alina sat, her back pressed against the rough bark. Her shirt and trousers, once a pale sun-bleached linen, were now a terrible tapestry of crimson. It was on her face, in her matted hair, staining her bare feet. She stared out at the horizon, where the last embers of the day were dying. Her eyes, usually the warm hazel of rich earth, were flat, ancient, and hollowed out by a horror too fresh to be a memory, too raw to be anything but the living present. The ringing in her ears, a high, thin whine, was slowly fading, replaced by the persistent hum of crickets and the distant, mournful cry of a coyote. A few yards away, Jedediah Stone knelt, his gaze fixed on her. His face, etched with the deep lines of sun and sorrow, was a study in grim endurance. His wide-brimmed hat, pushed back from his forehead, revealed a shock of iron-gray hair. He wore the practical clothes of a rancher, a faded denim vest over a work shirt, a red bandana tied loosely at his neck. His hands, gnarled and powerful, rested on his knees, not quite clenched, but ready. His horse, Bess, stood quietly by the corral fence, her head down, occasionally snorting at a fly. Two other geldings, the ranch's workhorses, were further back, still, watchful. The barn, a low-slung weathered structure, loomed behind them. It was from there that the heavy, metallic temps of spilled blood seemed to emanate, thick and cloying on the cooling air. Jedediah had found her like this. He'd been 2 days out, mending fences on the far north range, a task he usually shared with his wife, Martha. But Martha had passed 3 winters ago, leaving Jedediah and Alina to carve their lives from this unforgiving land alone. He'd seen the dust cloud first, an unnatural plume rising over his homestead, then the silence, the unnerving stillness of a place usually alive with the cluck of chickens, the lowing of cattle, the familiar sounds of home. He'd ridden in fast, his old Winchester already in his hand. He hadn't known what to expect. Indians, rustlers, just another lonely fool who'd lost his way and was looking for trouble. But he hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to find his daughter, his only child, covered in the blood of men he knew, men he'd crossed. The Red Scorpions, Silas Scar McCann and his crew. Vultures who preyed on the weak, who took what they wanted with brute force and cold steel. Jedediah had refused to sell them cattle 2 years prior, a principled stand that had earned him McCann's venomous promise. "You'll regret this, Stone. We remember." He'd tried to protect Alina from this life, from the harsh realities of the frontier. He'd taught her to read, to tend the garden, to churn butter. He'd taught her to ride, to shoot, to mend a fence, but he hadn't taught her to kill. And yet, here she was, a survivor, bathed in the proof of her desperate battle. "Alina," he said, his voice a low rumble, raw with unshed emotion. She flinched, as if waking from a trance. Her gaze, slow and unfocused, turned to him. She blinked, and a single crystal tear cut a clean path through the blood and grime on her cheek. "Pa," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp, barely audible. "They came." Jedediah nodded. He saw the story in the torn earth, the overturned wagon wheel, the dark, slick patch by the water trough where one of the scorpions lay, a grotesque bundle in the dying light. He'd done a quick sweep before approaching Alina, his rifle held ready. 2 dead in the yard, 1 in the barn. 3. Alina had been alone. "How many?" he asked, his voice tight. 4, she said, her eyes drifting back to the horizon, as if counting the ghosts out there. They were looking for you. Said you owed them." Flashback: Alina had been in the kitchen, kneading dough. The rhythmic thump-thump of her hands on the flour-dusted board was a comforting sound. The smell of yeast and warm bread filled the small room. She heard the horses first, too many, too fast for a friendly visit. Her heart had begun to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Mirroring the dough, she'd stepped to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. 4 men, hard-faced, dusty, and mean, pulled their horses to a halt in the yard. The one with a livid scar across his face, McCann, swung down, his eyes like chips of granite, assessing her. A sickening chill went through her. She'd heard the stories of the red scorpions. "Well, looky here," McCann had snarled, a cruel smile twisting his scarred mouth. "The old man ain't home. Just a little bird in the nest." "He's on the North Range," Alina said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to steady it. "He'll be back tomorrow. You can wait on the porch, if you have business." Another man, younger, with a pockmarked face and a nasty glint in his eye, laughed. "We ain't waiting for Old Man Stone. We came to collect." He gestured to the others. "Go on, boys. See what treasures our good friend Stone has hidden." 2 of them dismounted and headed for the barn. The pockmarked one, whom McCann called Kale, advanced on Alina. "Where's the strongbox girl? Where's the silver? We know he's got it." "We have nothing but what we earn," she said, backing into the kitchen, her hand reaching blindly for the heavy cast iron skillet on the stove. "Don't play coy," Kale sneered, grabbing her arm. His grip was like iron, his fingers digging into her flesh. She could smell the stale whiskey on his breath, the unwashed scent of him. Panic flared, hot and suffocating. She brought the skillet down with all her might. It made a sickening thud against his temple. He cried out, reeling back, releasing her arm. For a moment, he just stared, bewildered, a dark bruise already blooming on his scalp. Then his eyes hardened, glinting with a dangerous fury. "Bitch," he roared, lunging at her. She didn't run. She ducked, grabbed the butcher knife from the wooden block, a familiar weight in her hand, and spun. He was on her, his hands closing around her throat. Her vision began to gray out at the edges. With a desperate, primal scream, she plunged the knife upward, blindly, into his belly. He gasped, a terrible bubbling sound, and stumbled back, his hands tearing at the knife hilt embedded in him. He looked at her, his eyes wide with shock, then crumpled to the floor. The first one. The sound of the struggle had brought McCann and the 4th man, a lanky cowboy with a dusty black hat, back to the kitchen door. They stood there, frozen, staring at Kale's twitching body, then at Alina, who stood over him, wild-eyed, the bloody knife still in her hand. "What in the hell?" The lanky one breathed. "You crazy little whore," McCann bellowed, drawing his pistol. He fired, but Alina had already reacted, diving behind the overturned table. The bullet splintered wood where her head had been. She heard McCann shout orders, heard the sounds of shattering crockery. She knew they wouldn't take her alive. Not after this, not after Kale, and certainly not if McCann got his hands on her. She scrambled out the back door, the knife still clutched in her hand. She heard footsteps behind her, the heavy thud of boots. She heard the lanky cowboy's excited yell. She's running for the barn. The barn, her father's tools, the shotgun, a desperate hope. She made it to the barn, slamming the heavy wooden doors shut, fumbling for the crossbar. It slid home with a satisfying thud, but she heard them outside, cursing, pounding on the doors. "Open up, you little hellcat," McCann roared. She grabbed her father's old double-barrel shotgun from its pegs. The heavyweight was familiar, comforting. She found a box of shells, loading it with trembling fingers. She pressed herself against the wall, shotgun raised, waiting. She could hear them splintering the wood, the shouts growing louder. Then, the heavy doors burst inward, one hinge tearing loose. The lanky cowboy was framed in the doorway, his face a mask of furious determination. She didn't hesitate. She fired both barrels. The recoil slammed her back against the wall, bruising her shoulder. but the force of the blast lifted the man off his feet, sending him sprawling lifelessly to the dirt outside. 2. A moment of stunned silence, then McCann's furious roar. "She's got a gun. The bitch has a gun." Alina scrambled further into the barn, heart pounding, reloading the shotgun with hands slick with sweat. She heard McCann enter, more cautiously this time. She heard him call out, "Come out, girl. We'll make this quick, unless you want to regret it." He meant it. She knew he did. She saw the glint of his pistol, moving slowly through the shadowed stalls. She squeezed herself behind a stack of hay bales, the shotgun held ready. He passed her, just feet away. She saw her father's pitchfork, leaning against the wall. A desperate, impossible plan formed in her mind. She waited, holding her breath, until he turned his back to peer into another stall. Then, with a scream torn from the depths of her soul, she lunged. She grabbed the pitchfork, its 3 sharp tines, surprisingly light in her hands, and brought it down with all her strength. She wasn't aiming for the chest. She was aiming for the back, where she knew it would do the most damage. The force of the impact was like hitting rock. McCann grunted, a terrible, guttural sound. The pitchfork stuck. She pushed again, shoving him forward, pinning him against the hay bales. He roared in agony, dropping his pistol, his hands scrabbling at the tines embedded in his back. He collapsed, gurgling, a ruin of a man. 3. She had killed 3 men. She stood over him, breathing hard, the pitchfork still in her hands, its tines dripping. Then, she saw the decision, once spoken, settled over the homestead like a shroud. The world for Jedediah and Alina had narrowed to a single, brutal imperative: survival. Waiting was a death sentence. Inside, Jedediah commanded, his voice brooking no argument. He stood, his joints cracking like dry wood. He offered Alina a hand. She flinched as he touched her, a residual tremor of the battle still humming beneath her skin. But she took his hand, pulling herself up with a grunt of pain. Every muscle screamed in protest. Her ribs felt like shattered glass, her arms and legs heavy with exhaustion. But she stood. He guided her into the house, past the horror in the kitchen, the overturned table, the scattered flour, the dark, congealed blood that smeared the flagstones. It was a testament to the savagery she had endured. Jedediah kicked the back door shut, the hollow thud echoing through the quiet house. He lit the kerosene lamp on the mantel, its warm, yellow glow doing little to dispel the chill that had settled deep in Elena's bones. He found a clean basin, pumped it full of cool well water, and tore a fresh strip of linen from a spare sheet. He knelt before her, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he began to wash the blood from her face. Alina winced at his touch, but didn't pull away. The cool water was a blessing against her burning skin. As the crimson mask was slowly wiped away, Jedediah saw the bruises blooming beneath a split lip, a raw scrape on her cheekbone, the hollow exhaustion in her eyes. "Ribs?" he asked, his voice low. "McCann hit me with his pistol, but," she whispered, a fresh wave of nausea washing over her as the memory surfaced. "In the barn, when he had me down." Jedediah nodded, his jaw tight. He carefully probed her side, eliciting a sharp gasp of pain from Alina. Cracked, maybe more. No breaks, thank God. He bound her tightly with another strip of linen, pulling it snug until she could barely breathe. "It'll help hold you together." He then cleaned the various cuts and scrapes on her arms and legs. There was one particularly nasty gash on her forearm, deep and ragged. He poured a generous splash of strong corn whiskey over it. Alina screamed, a raw animal sound that tore from her throat. Tears streamed down her face, washing away the last traces of blood, revealing the stark, pale skin beneath. "Better now than fester later," Jedediah said, his voice devoid of emotion. He found a needle and thread, and with rough efficiency, stitched the worst of the wound closed, then bound it tightly. When he was done, he stepped back, surveying his daughter. She was clean, bandaged, but still trembling, her eyes haunted. "We move tonight," he said, his voice flat. "Tonight?" she asked, bewildered. "Where?" "We just fought them off." "That boy who ran," Jedediah explained patiently, as if explaining a hard truth to a child. "He ain't just going to tell them. He's going to lead them back here, with more men, and they'll be angrier. We can't wait here for that." He began to move around the house, his movements purposeful. He filled a canvas sack with jerky, dried beans, hardtack, and a tin of coffee. He gathered ammunition for his Winchester rifle and his Colt pistol. He took his bedroll, his heavy wool blanket. "We tracked the boy," he said, returning to her side. "He'll lead us to their camp. We hit them there, on our terms, not theirs." Alina stared at him, her mind reeling. "We? You mean you and me? Against all of them?" "We," Jedediah confirmed, his eyes like chips of flint. "There's no one else, and I ain't leaving you to face them alone. You understand?" A slow, cold resolve began to build in Alina. The terror was still there, a knot in her stomach, but it was overshadowed by something else, a grim determination. She had faced death and survived. She had killed. She would do what she had to do. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice steady now, devoid of its previous tremor. Jedediah tossed her worn leather boots. "Put these on. Get your coat. It'll be cold for dawn." While Alina struggled with her boots, her father went to the corral. He saddled Bess, his own sturdy mare, and then Apollo, Elena's buckskin gelding. He moved with a quiet efficiency born of years in the saddle, his movements precise and economical. When he returned, Alina was standing by the back door, her coat clutched around her, the cold having seeped into the house. He handed her the shotgun, reloading it with 2 fresh shells. "You're better with this in a close fight," he said. "Keep it handy, and take this." He unholstered his Colt pistol and handed it to her, along with a handful of extra cartridges. "Load it. Keep it on you. You never know." Alina took the heavy pistol, its cold steel, a stark contrast to her trembling hands. It felt alien, terrifying, but necessary. They walked out of the house, leaving the lamplit interior behind, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. The bodies of the red scorpions lay where they had fallen, dark shapes under the vast, indifferent sky. Jedediah didn't look at them. Alina didn't either. They were no longer men, but obstacles removed. Jedediah mounted Bess, his gaze already scanning the ground for the faintest sign of a horse moving east. Alina, with a grunt of pain, pulled herself into Apollo's saddle. The horse shifted nervously, sensing the heavy burden of the moment. The moon, a thin, silver sliver, offered little light, but the stars were a brilliant, scattered dust across the velvet black of the prairie sky. "He rode hard," Alina said, her voice quiet. "Panicked? He probably cut a straight line." "Good," Jedediah grunted. "Easy to follow then. He'll push his horse till it drops. He won't think to cover his tracks. He just wants to get to his friends. And when we find them?" Alina asked, her voice almost a whisper. Jedediah turned to her, his profile stark against the starlight. "Then we make sure they never bother another soul." His voice was utterly devoid of malice, or even anger. It was simply a statement of fact, a grim resolution. Alina looked at her father, this hard, unyielding man, who was now her co-conspirator in a deadly hunt. He was not just her father anymore. He was her shield, her guide, and a mirror of the brutal truth that had been forged in the crucible of this land. "Pa," she said, a tremor in her voice. He turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "I'm scared," she confessed, the admission torn from her. A beat of silence. Then, Jedediah reached out, his calloused hand resting for a moment on her arm, a gesture of quiet strength. "Good," he said. "Fear keeps you alive. It keeps you sharp. Don't let it freeze you. Let it make you move." He pulled his hand back and turned his horse. Let's go. He kicked Bess into a steady trot, heading east, following the barely discernible trail of a single, panicked horse. Alina followed, the shotgun heavy across her lap, the pistol cold against her hip. She looked at the vast empty prairie stretching before them, a canvas of endless night and unknown dangers. She was no longer a victim. She was no longer just a girl. She was a hunter, and the hunt had just begun. The crimson twilight was gone, replaced by the deep, unforgiving black of the frontier night. And they rode into it, together, two souls forged in fire, seeking their reckoning.